Welcome to another edition of TSA Safety Matters. I'm your host, Greg Kerr from Stakeholder Relations, and today we're with Sunny Silva, TSA's Elevating and Amusement Device Inspector. Special guest, Dr. Catherine Woodcock from Ryerson's Thrill Lab, and Roger Neat, TSA's Elevating and Amusement Device Director, for a special event at Toronto Island Centreville. So thanks for being here today, guys.
Thank you. Thank you, Greg.
Now, Roger, maybe you can kick things off to begin with and tell us why we're at Centreville.
Yeah, we want to get together and we want to start talking about how we can increase accessibility for persons with disabilities on amusement rides. It was interesting. This past year, we've had several situations where patrons with physical disabilities have been refused access to rides. And it's something relatively new in the industry. In all the years I've been here at TSA, we had never really heard about it before. And so it kind of got us thinking that it's something we got to begin thinking about. We got to begin talking with members of the industry, whether it's the ride operators, the ride manufacturers, our own inspectors as well, and create greater awareness about how we can increase that accessibility.
So, Sunny, what do you see in the field, and what do you see from a personal perspective?
Well, I've been in the field for a long time, and I've seen the need increase for accommodating people with disabilities. I personally have been in situations with both my son and daughter have met height requirements and met all the ride requirements, but I've had to make that judgment call because of their needs for actually going on the ride.
Mm-hmm. So, Catherine, you've long been an advocate for equity on all levels, and you've worked on issues on human engineering and on ride inspection, on making things fun and safe at the same time through your work at Ryerson's Thrill Lab. What are you seeing in the industry right now with this new trend?
Well, I think you're right. As a human factors engineer, I'm used to looking at what functional abilities a person needs to do a certain job. And as a person with a disability myself, I'm also accustomed to being excluded from things that I can do because people are afraid it might be bad for me or I might not do it well. And so I understand both sides of the story, that we have to make sure that people have the abilities to participate safely. At the same time, we have to make sure that we're not protecting people from having normal experiences that maybe would be a little uncomfortable, but as part of a full life experience of having fun and maybe having a few bumps in the road.
So are there any rules or sort of guidelines that are out of date that are causing issues?
Well, the ride design standards require the designer engineer to do a rider containment analysis and a patron suitability assessment, but it doesn't really explain how. So when we did in the lab a review of 100 ride manuals selected at random, we discovered that the criteria were actually kind of vague, and the rationale for the requirements wasn't explicit in the manual. So it makes it very difficult when an owner buys a ride and has a guest come to them and say, I'd like to ride. The owner has a difficult time evaluating, is this a legitimate safety concern, or was the designer engineer 50 years ago taking the easy way out?
So what are we looking for example, when we're looking at height requirements?
Well, it's very interesting. Height requirements sometimes, very rarely, is because you need to have a body of a certain height. More often, it's because you need to have a seated height of a certain height, or a height from seat to shoulder to fit a restraint. Or it might be because somebody has decided that you needed a certain behavioral maturity, and they think that by a certain age, that's how tall you are. Or maybe you need a certain muscular development in order to resist the forces of the ride. So until we know what the designer had in mind, we really don't know how to read that height requirement. If a person needs to be a certain age, but they happen to be a little person who's an adult, a look at their driver's license would prove that they're old enough to ride if it was expressed in terms of age. If you need to have a certain seated height in order to fit the restraints and a person has no legs and there are no forces that preclude amputees from riding, then being able to measure their seated height would be adequate. But right now, as long as the ride manual says a certain number of inches of full body height, the only thing you can do is say, I can measure your height, or you can show me some document that proves that that's how tall you are. And we need to bring TSSA and the owners and the manufacturers all into a discussion of what exactly are we looking for, and can we state this any clearer so that the owners aren't always stuck in the middle when a guest comes to them with a legitimate request. I mean, really, this is a wonderful problem to have. What other industry do you have where people want to buy your product so enthusiastically that they're willing to take you to court to have that opportunity?
So, Roger, is there anything that we can do in the interim? You're seeing a lot of these incidents sort of pop up. What can we do about it?
Well, part of it is what we're doing today, just trying to get the discussion started with the members of the industry, post things like this video today. We're going to be talking about it at our upcoming fall council meeting with industry, and create that awareness that industry needs to begin thinking about who's going to present themselves at their gates, what disabilities they might have, and how they might accommodate them, and begin thinking about how can we look at those age-old dossiers that might have been from 50 years ago that didn't have a whole lot of thought about persons with disabilities and were perhaps too restrictive, and begin looking at those. So get the industry players on board there. We'll talk about it at our NARSO Fall Forum as well. We're going to continue to work with Catherine in looking at how maybe TSA can change some of its processes, some of our application forms, where when someone's submitting a new ride to us, we'll ask questions about how will you accommodate persons with disabilities, and just get the discussion going, because it's relatively new to everyone. In fairness to everyone, no one in the industry has really given this a whole lot of thought so far, but we want to really get that ball rolling.
Well, everyone's on a learning curve, and you're seeing varying abilities, but you've seen good players, right, that are actually, what are they doing?
Yeah. Well, there's some great players out there. There's some people that are coming up, doing the assessments on their own now, thinking about it in advance, because they recognize that it's just good for their business, it's good for their customers, and so some of them are already starting to do it because they're sort of the early adopters. But we want to try and help them. Look at what we can do from the regulator standpoint, just also with our roles with the code committees and Catherine and others. So we just want to get it going.
Catherine, you have a unique international perspective with your work on code committees and addressing all these issues. In fact, you even have a sabbatical where you're working on this very issue of access and disability. What do you see that's exciting that's out there?
Well, for the last 2 years, the international amusement park industry has been collaborating through its various organizations, the International Association of Amusement Parks and Attractions, the ASTM Standards Committee, the Euronorm Standards Groups have been collaborating on trying to find a common pathway forward for this. We've had meetings all over the world. Over 200 people have participated in these. We've been doing some empirical assessments. We've been analyzing policies and procedures. There's a lot of enthusiasm for this because everybody knows that we don't quite yet have a common approach. But the amount of enthusiasm for this is fantastic. We've been having ongoing workshops when these groups get together to try to articulate methods for ride assessment. We can't, through this process, the standards process, compel anybody to make a certain ride. What we can do is we can compel them when they make a ride to make it a certain way. The market forces will be what pulls owners into purchasing rides that have accessibility features. There are manufacturers that are realizing that if they put a new product on the market that has more accessibility features, maybe they'll beat another vendor that doesn't have those features. So people are starting to see this as maybe money that's on the table, and I think that's really exciting when people realize it's not just a burden or a responsibility, but it's actually an opportunity for them to really be successful business-wise.
That's fantastic for going forward, but we also have a lot of work to do with existing rides. Sonny, what are you? What's one approach that TSA can take?
I think TSA is open to have updates to the technical dossier and have a risk assessment done and have us review it with the appropriate accommodations for the ride. And we definitely want the rider to be safe, and we want others to be safe. That's the number one goal. But assessment done and the review of the existing dossier, I think that can all be done.
Mm-hmm. And we want to do this together, right? Yes. It's a partnership to meet everyone's needs.
For sure.
Yeah.
Excellent. So let's go take a look and see what Centerville's doing.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks.
So, Sonny, we're with Shane Beasley, Centerville's general manager, and Shane actually wanted to thank you for letting us be here today, but What's Centerville's actual practices when they encounter disabilities?
Well, what we do here in the park is if someone comes up and tells us that they have a disabled child or whatever, we allow the disabled child to pay for the wristband, and then we allow the parent or whoever is accompanying them to ride the rides for free. So they get a vertical stamp on their hand and they can go up to all the rides. And if they go to the ride attendants and tell them that, say, my child doesn't like to stand in lines, then we'll pick a spot in the lineup. When that customer comes up, then we'll let them come in through the exit and give them the option to get on the ride through the exit.
So, do you have an example that you've implemented that sort of helps along these lines?
Well, with this carousel, which is behind us, we have 3 different types of options. You can get on an animal that moves up and down if that's within your ability. We also have stationary animals, and we also have 2 chariots that people can sit down and enjoy the ride also. So.
Excellent. So, Sonny, what should a parent do when they come to a place like Centerville?
I think it's important that the parent goes to the office and talks to a representative from Centerville and expresses their concerns and some of their limitations or disabilities, and I think, like Shane said, they'll try to do their best to accommodate in a safe manner, and hopefully in the future, with more risk analysis being done on rides, that we can have more accommodations at the park for everybody.
Excellent. Well, that's great, Sonny. It seems like this is a trend that's happening within the industry, and everyone has to keep their sort of eye on this because it is legislation.
Yes, yeah. I mean, the key message here is under the AODA requirements, everybody has a duty to accommodate persons with disabilities, and this just gets us thinking about it now.
And Catherine, you're going to continue to do work on the ground and work on design. What are you looking forward to?
I'm looking forward to everybody appreciating that this is not a scary threat to the operators of attractions, but it's actually an opportunity that brings the community together and allows people to have a full life, rich experience. I think we also have to educate the consumers that sometimes they're going to encounter something that's a novel experience for the owner, and they have to explain the situation to the owner, and if the initial person they contact at the owner doesn't understand what they're trying to accomplish, go to the supervisor or go to the park guest relations. I think most people want happy outcomes. This is an industry that sells fun, so people want to see happy outcomes.
So, Sonny, what are you seeing actually on the field?
Well, there's already a number of parks that already have these processes in place, and they have some sort of accommodations for people with disabilities. And I encourage everybody that are going out to spend time at an attraction or an amusement park to contact them ahead of time, and so that way it's enjoyable for everybody.
Yeah, both working together, so that I'm a parent, go to guest services, see how they accommodate you, and the park actually helping to make that happen.
Correct. Yeah.
Excellent. So thanks for being with us today. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Stay tuned for more TSA Safety Matters.